It is Friday, February the 2nd. That's right, 2/2/2024. And of course, a lot of things are going on in the world. I've got my good friend Rick Rosner with me, and we'll see who else joins us as well. And of course, we've got a number of things in the news, and I'm actually interested to hear Rick's thoughts about something that I found out early this morning as I was on an early morning call with a potential guest for Pod TV and all along those lines. But before I get to that question and ask Rick what I've got to ask him, let's see what's going on in the world and all in that space. Israel says the new next target is crowded Gaza border city, and they are definitely adding some urgency to what is going on in that area. And there is actually a Gaza hostage proposal, and of course, there are still those U.S. sanctions in the West Bank. And El Salvador's strong man is set to ride a landslide past check and balances. And definitely, it looks like a lot of people are paying attention to Nayib Bukele, the self-styled CEO of El Salvador. So it looks like he is on course to win an election in that area. And, some people like to think of themselves as CEOs in their country and all along those lines. And there was a gas explosion that sparked a massive fire in Nairobi. That's Nairobi, Kenya, killing 3 and injuring 298. And apparently, there were some ignored warning moments before the horrific Mbagasi blast. So, definitely, that is something that is going on as an inferno set off by a gas blast in Kenya's capital, injured those hundreds, and it killed a few as well. And it was like a earthquake, according to some of the people that were there, and all along those lines. And Northern Ireland is set to restore government after the UK Parliament approves the deal. With Sean Fan in the minister post, looks like there might be Republicans in that area of the world, or Republicans in that part of the world, because a Republican there doesn't necessarily have the same meaning as Republicans here, but it does look like they will have their day at the last in that part of the world. So a lot of people are paying attention to that. U.S. Defense Chief Austin is hinting at a major strike on Iranian proxies that could be imminent. So he is definitely saying that could be happening. And Biden is weighing how the response to Iran could affect Israel Hamas negotiations and even his own political fate. So definitely it is things that are going on in that way as well. And apparently there is some notion of even there being comedy. And I've definitely got to hear what folks have got to say about that, particularly Rick Rosner. But there are some folks that are wondering if it's all right to be having fun if you're in the middle of a war, because apparently there is some comedy that is still going on in that country that is a war torn. And apparently there was an article in the Atlantic about the dark art of comedy in Ukraine. So I guess that even though they're in the middle of a war, there are places where people are still going to comedy shows and all along those lines. And it says that Ukraine is running low on weapons and humor as U.S. aid is stalling. But I guess that even in the middle of a war, people can go out there and still have a good time, or at least try to have a good time as well. And apparently, an Italian mafia boss who escaped a maximum security prison using bed sheets last year is captured on a French island. So he was out there free for a while, but now he is no longer free. He has been recaptured on a French island. And EU overcomes Orban's veto on the 50 billion plus Ukraine aid deal. So Hungary's Viktor Orban has revealed weaknesses as he folds before the European Union, according to the Washington Post. So that is some people that are looking at things in that way. And Ukraine is claiming that its sea drones sank a Russian warship. So that is something else that is going on as well. So definitely a lot of people are paying attention to a number of things that are taking place on that global community and all in that way. The U.S. hints at a large response to the Iran-backed militia is imminent as the Houthi rebels target another ship. So definitely Iran-backed Houthis launched 3 attacks in the Red Sea, Gulf of Aden as tensions escalate, and the U.S. military is responding. A Houthi missile was just seconds from hitting a U.S. warship is one of the things that folks are talking about in that space as well. And an Iranian Revolutionary Guard advisor said it was said to have been killed in an alleged Israeli strike in Syria. So that is something else that is going on there in the Middle East as well. So, like I said, a number of things are going on. A matter of fact, if you're wondering what Iran is saying about all this, Iran won't start a war, but will respond to bullies, according to its president. So the USC signs Iran is worried about escalating proxy attacks amid heightened tensions. And U.S. intelligence officials estimate Tehran does not have full control of its proxy groups. So that is something else that folks are paying attention to as well. And by the way, it looks like India has freed a pigeon accused of spying for China after 8 months in custody. So a pigeon collared as a possible Chinese spy is freed after 8 months. So yeah, sometimes these spies are not just our human version, but they are also our feathered friends and others as well. And North Korea has tested more cruise missiles as leader Kim calls for war readiness. So that is something else that we are seeing as well, and all along those lines. So like I said, a lot of things are taking place, and we're going to get to some of the things that are going on and even having some discussion about some of these things as well. By the way, if you're wondering about in the U.S. news, in Clearwater, Florida, there was a plane crash that left 3 dead, and they're looking for bodies after a small plane crash and burned in a Florida mobile home area, and all in that space. And Southern California is in the crosshairs of a powerful atmospheric storm that is going on as well. So it looks like an atmospheric river storm is taking place in that sense and along those lines. So a lot of people are definitely paying attention to a number of these things. And of course, there's a number of things that are going on that people will continue to pay attention to, and that they will continue to see how they play out in the world and all along those lines. Most Republican senators have been barred from re-election in Oregon after walkouts. So definitely we got some political things that are happening as well. So the Oregon Supreme Court stops 10 GOP lawmakers from running for re-election, siding with the Democrats' ballot ban. And so definitely we got different states that are trying to get either people off or on the whole notion of what's going on. And by the way, it looks like Punxsutawney's Phil has come out and not seen his shadow, but meteorologist Jason Doris might have. So it looks like a lot of people will be thinking of that prediction in terms of weather, because definitely it was Groundhog Day, and that particular famous groundhog has made his prediction. I know people will be paying attention to others as well. And the House has passed a child tax credit expansion, which could benefit millions of families, according to experts that are out there as well. So definitely this is a number of things that are going on in the world. We'll get to some other stories as well. And of course, I've got people with me like Jatovia McDuffie, Rick Rosner, Sasha Starr, and others as well. Rick, one of the questions I had to ask you, and definitely want to hear from other folks as well, but one question I was going to ask you is, like, as I said earlier, I was up this morning interviewing a potential guest. They actually come out of the space of sleep, because of the times we don't get enough of that, and all along those lines. So they may be coming on to talk to us about that science, and I think that's scheduled for the 19th of this month. But they were in UK. They're originally from this area, and I know you just recently visited parts of Europe and all along those lines. But they had told me that in, I guess, most of London, that they do not have pharmaceutical ads and they don't have political ads, which we know that's very unusual if you're here in the United States, because they're all over the place and all along those lines. So I was just wondering, did you observe that when you were overseas? Because as I was talking to this woman, Tracy, who is the sleep doctor, or one of the various sleep doctors, she was saying that, and I forget which part of London or the UK she lives in, but she was like, no, we don't have pharmaceutical ads and we don't have political ads, and we don't mind not having those. But I just wonder if you observed that they didn't have those. And she was also talking about,
I didn't specifically notice that, but our Airbnb didn't have a TV, so it was a nice break from everything. Under Trump, I lost 15 pounds because I was just pooping all the time. He messed up my stomach because I was freaking out all the time, and I just did normal pooping while I was in London because I wasn't freaking out.
Gotcha. You weren't freaking out and everything, but yeah, it was just interesting when I was talking to this woman, and I don't know if it's countrywide, but she did give me the impression that it was countrywide and all along those lines. And she was also talking about something that I know even Sasha has brought up with Israel and with other places of the world. But she was talking about how she wishes that the United States would do more of that coalition government. And in another show that I had recently, there was people that were talking about like Robert Byrd and some of the ways that they used to work across the aisles, but we don't see a lot of that right now. So, Sasha, I think that there have been times even in Canada that when there has been coalition governments, but do you think that a coalition government could work in the United States? Because that was one of the other things that was brought up on a couple of interviews that I've done, with this notion of coalition governments and the different parties even working across the aisle and everything, which we know is not necessarily happening these days. But I just wanted your take on that, and I'd love to hear Jacoby's as well.
I don't think that the U.S. Political system has been designed for any coalition government whatsoever. It's just not there. It has to be decisive victory of one of the two parties. There is no room for third party or anything like this. It's all fantasy. And one who will win will rule. Now, the thing is that you still have to know how to rule and how to get maximum advantages of you being at the helm. But that remains to be seen how it will be implemented. But so far, there must be decisive victory. Today, nobody has a decisive situation. So I think it will be resolved by election later this year.
Yeah.
The last time we kind of didn't have a two-party system was under our first president, George Washington, where everybody just kind of agreed that he was the best guy for the job. But that was, 230 years ago. And since then, we've had two parties. It hasn't always been the same two parties. And right now we're in kind of a mess because one of the parties has gone just kind of completely crappy and crazy, and it remains to be, it's bad. It's better when you've got two functioning parties, and it remains to be seen if the Republicans will be able to pull out of this. But even though they're crappy and crazy because of the Electoral College and gerrymandering, they still have a decent chance of winning the presidency. If you look at Las Vegas gambling odds, Trump's odds of being reelected are better than 50%. Biden's odds are a little less than 40%, which is, I don't know, considering the performance of the two guys, just strikes me as nuts. But yeah, two-party system, we're not set up for parliamentary or multi-party coalitions or any of that.
Jacoby, what's your thoughts on that and everything? Because like I said, we're just interested in talking to that particular woman very early this morning and everything, but I just wanted your take on this notion of a coalition government and also the way that the media is handled, and particularly the notion of how we have political ads all over the place here, and maybe in other parts of the world they don't do it as much.
I mean, truthfully, I think we get into our teams and then don't want to think about the teams. However, the reason we have gotten to where we are, where we consider that bipartisanship is bad, is due to the fact of the one party that especially currently, and it's the party that you were just speaking about, Rick, has gone and let the extremists at the top of the ticket. So when you're an extremist within that party, and this happens in the Democrat Party as well, if there is an extremist, that extremist only wants to think about, okay, well, Democrats only have the answers. Well, those individuals aren't even close to the top of the party. They make no decisions in the party. So a lot of the Democrat Party honestly has been pushing out to make, try to do the whole bipartisanship and stuff like that. However, on the Republican ticket, you have the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, the Lauren Boeberts, interestingly enough, in the Republican district that she's in, that 4th congressional district, primary, they had asked, because there were 9 of them. They had asked, had anybody been arrested?
Yeah, 9 potential candidates for that.
7 of 9, and the 10th wasn't there, but 7 of 10 candidates had been arrested. But yet they're leading the party. But I digress on that. But right now, that party, because they are the heads of the party, they don't want any bipartisanship. When, for example, in the House, people will not work with the Republican Party said that they won't negotiate, for example, on the immigration bill. They're not going to negotiate on the immigration bill at all because it gives Biden a win. It's not for the people, it's for the power of the Republican Party. Prior years or prior in history, there has been some give and take and some bipartisanship. The old guard of the Republican Party, which is still leaning towards the extremist side, which is pushing Trump as well. But even the old guard that's in the Senate negotiated on a bipartisan, or is negotiating on a bipartisan deal. Yeah, sure, it's leaning Republican the way that border bill is set up, but it's still a bipartisan thing. There was actually a senator, a Republican senator, it was a House member. It was one or the other that wanted to work bipartisan on something, but they got censured in their for trying to work with the Democrats on something. So that gets into the whole talking of, are we set up for a 2-party system to be able to rule and stuff like that? I mean, yeah, sure, we're set up for that. Can we do the coalition style where we work together and stuff? It's happened in our past. And then honestly, even on the child tax credit, it happened. But when it's something big that can be used for an election season, one party shuts down because right now, we'll say today, we're not going to talk about historically because even in history, this is different today because the Republican Party and the Democrat Party, they would get a little feisty, but they would still work together in the past. But right now, currently, one party will not work with the other party. And that is the Republican Party right now. They are unwilling to budge on anything because it is an election year.
In France, by law, the election season can't be longer than 6 weeks. You're not allowed to campaign. You're not allowed to throw up ads, and that must be very nice. Here, we've pretty much got an 18-month, 2-year election system. We have elections every 2 years, so it's almost always election season. Now, what Toby was saying in about 2008, when the Supreme Court, I think, did the Citizens United decision that said that money is free speech and corporations are people, then the nature of the job of being in Congress, the Senate, changed, where those guys and ladies half of their time is or less is spent in Congress or the Senate. The other half is they have to go to a separate building that has a bunch of telephones. They have to sit in this building and call people and beg for money. And it's a terrible job. How would you like having to spend 30 hours a week cold calling people and just pleading that? And so the quality of the candidates who are willing.
Rick, really quick, and this is for everybody on this particular show and everything. It's not just the national politicians as well, because there have been conversations around term limits. And right here, as Jatovia knows, because we're both here in Durham, we just recently elected a new mayor. And some people feel that as soon as you are elected, whether you're there in California or even in other parts of the world, like Canada, where Sasha is, that you are almost immediately running again. So there's a lot of people that are thinking that our current mayor, Leonardo Williams, is already probably actively campaigning. Trying to accomplish some of the goals that he set out, but he's also got to campaign for the next election as well. So I just wondering.
So the Republicans in 2010 thereabouts came up with a genius strategy called Red Map. Mm-hmm. Republicans figured out that we shouldn't be focusing just on big elections. That little elections are cheaper to win. And if you win a lot of little elections, you can control state legislatures, and then you can control the congressional map. And so they flooded little elections with candidates and money, and they took over like almost 3/4 of the state legislatures and governorships in America. And they changed the next 10 years. They dominated politics, even though they're in a minority. And then in the last couple of years, they're like, let's do school board elections too. And they've been trying to flood the zone with extremist candidates for these little elections that nobody ever paid attention to before.
Yeah. Go ahead, Sasha.
I don't know if you follow the latest news. It shows that financial situation of Republican Party is worst of all time. They have $8 million left. Their fundraising is going nowhere. Of course, you know that Trump's legal bills were for 2023, $50 million plus, and it was all paid by Republican Party. So when these people are doing cold calls, trying to raise money, so I understand the difficulties what they're encountering, because a normal person would say, so you want me, Joe, to contribute to multi-billionaire Donald Trump my little $10 or $20, whatever I still have? Are you crazy or what? So normal people would never even consider that. However, that's a great scenario what is being played with Donald Trump. It's not criminal proceedings which will dig him in. No, it's a civil proceedings where he has to very soon, probably next week, to appeal. He has to come up with probably $600 million. And now we will find out if he has any money left, because there's one lawyer more than a year ago answering questions of what's the future of Trump and his proceedings and so on. He said Trump will never go to jail, but by the end of all these proceedings, he will be destitute. He'll die as a very poor man. That's what he said. And it seems to me that's where it all goes.
We've had great Republican presidents of the past. Lincoln, our greatest president, Republican. Teddy Roosevelt, Eisenhower, good president. The first George Bush, a very good president. But then they fell off the table into crap land. Like a lot of Trump has underperformed in Iowa and New Hampshire. The polls, the predictions of how well he'd do. He did very well. You know, he won in landslides in each place, but not as well as predicted. And there are a lot of decent people. My parents were, decent, good Republican people who are disgusted with Trump and much of the party. He was found in court. Now, Bill Clinton had to pay rape settlements. Bill Clinton liked to have sex. He liked to get with ladies, sometimes coercively, and have sex on them. Trump was found in court to have smashed E. Jean Carroll face first into the wall of a dressing room and shoved his fingers into her, which is not an act of sexual gratification, but an act of domination and cruelty and humiliation. And this guy is the leading candidate for president and has spent $50 million of his donors' money last year on lawyers, and a lot of good, decent Republican people, of which, I would guess they're still in the majority, are like, if they're paying attention, are like kind of like yuck.
But speaking of that yuck factor and everything, and we've kind of talked about her before and along those lines, but there is some notion and there is some idea that Nikki Haley may be gaining traction in her home state and everything. So apparently she's been attacking Trump's morals, his age and wealth, as she is looking to stave off that home state loss. And she was the former governor of South Carolina and all along those lines. And they are saying that she is closing the gap. So is there a possibility that some of these campaign talking points might actually help her either win South Carolina or lose it not as badly as some people were earlier projecting, and all along those lines. So I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts around that, because definitely it does look like she might be gaining some ground in South Carolina. And this is even before we get to Super Tuesday, which will be in March and everything. But any idea as to whether she might actually win in the state that is one below me and Jacoby and Nick, who is always in the room as well, down there in South Carolina?
Mark, it doesn't matter. I just look when we discussed the betting odds on Trump and Biden. I started to get interested, and I look at the betting odds, and I discovered one very interesting thing: that the chances of Michelle Obama are greater than Nikki Haley. How about that?
Well,
if you bet on Michelle Obama, she's like 7-1. Even though she has said dozens of times she hates politics, she would never allow herself to be recruited to be a candidate. And Nikki Haley is like 18-1. And in South Carolina, Trump is polling at like 62%, and Nikki Haley's polling at less than half of that. And if the performances are consistent with the previous two caucus and election, Trump will probably get, in the high 50s. And Nikki Haley will pull, most of the rest of that. So she'll get in the low 40s, which is still a solid Trump win.
And it's a great pity for Republicans, because according to all polls that I've seen, Nikki Haley has much greater chance to win against Biden than Donald Trump. However, I would still recommend that she would stay as long as she can in a race, because I think Trump, he may even terminate his campaign simply because of lack of money and all these lawsuits against him, civil and criminal proceedings and so on. So maybe she will win just by default, not because she has a great number of candidates, the electors. No, simply because there will be no one else left. And Trump is in great troubles right now.
Speaking of great troubles, there's another story that's out there and everything, and we've talked about it on this network and other places as well, about security and cybersecurity. And apparently an ex-CIA computer engineer has just recently been sentenced to 40 years in prison for his role in a spy agency hacking case and everything. So he sent the CIA secrets to WikiLeaks, and definitely that's something that is going on. So I guess he's going to spend 40 years in prison for giving those information to WikiLeaks and everything. So Joshua Schulte will be spending that time in prison, and all along those lines. I'm not sure under which administration he was and everything. And there's actually an ex-Trump organization, CFO, that is in talks to plead guilty to perjury charges that are tied to a civil fraud investigation. And that is the gentleman, Alan Weisselberg, and everything. So I just wanted y'all's take, particularly around this CIA hacking job that took place, and this guy that got 40 years, because I'm thinking that we need all of these state and national secrets going off to WikiLeaks and all in this space. And I'm sure that if Rex was here originally, he'd have some thoughts, and maybe even Kim Calhoun, one of our founders. But what's y'all's take on this? And I do know this took place some time back, but the gentleman is now getting called out for it and is going to spend 40 years in prison for his role in that. But there might be others that'll say that that is still going on even to this day, whether it's the CIA or whether it's the FBI or whether it's a number of the other agencies, including the IRS and others, that are actually maybe turning their information over too quickly to other enemy states. So any thoughts?
An IRS guy just pleaded guilty to leaking Trump's tax information and the taxes of a bunch of other rich people. And if you watch The Americans, the show about the Russian sleeper agents, there have always been exploitable. I mean, there have always been spies, because those are big agencies. A bunch of people work for the government, and a whole range of soreheads and lunatics and righteously angry people. There are people who are exploitable to can be approached by foreign intelligence agencies, lonely, horny people with honeypot. There's lots of ways for people to become willing to leak information, and it's been going on forever.
Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna get to another serious topic and everything, but I was curious, and I want to hear from to tell you about this other thing that is tied to what that whole spy notion and all along those lines. But just to have a little humor, since we were on Friday, and I did mention it in the news story earlier and everything. I'm just trying to figure out why the pigeon was charged with 8 months and why the pigeon got released, because apparently this pigeon was charged with the crime of being part of a spy ring, and what he was doing. Maybe he was spending time in pigeon jail. Or
I read the article, so I can tell you that
Please.
They found a pigeon in India with a band, a little a label wrapped around each of its legs, and it looked like Chinese. And then they investigated, and it turned out to be Korean, and it was like a professional racing pigeon where you release the pigeons from point A, and then the pigeons race to get to point B, and somehow this pigeon had taken a left turn and ended up in India instead of Korea.
So that's how the pigeon wound up getting charged with being a spy, and he wasn't actually a spy.
Not the first time a suspected pigeon spy.
It's a stool pigeon.
A stool pigeon, literally. Yes.
But I think releasing it was correct, because the stool pigeon didn't have any real malice or intent to commit a crime. So send it back on its merry way.
They release it to a wildlife park where it can just
right. There's no malice and intent on behalf of the animal, and hence
no malice or intent. Yeah. Well, speaking of India,
we're going to see more animal spies in the future, because Elon Musk's he's developing these chips, and he may not be the one who's successful, but eventually we'll be able to put brain chips in animals and people. And there was a movie in the 70s where they trained a dolphin to be a spy, and it wasn't real, but in the future, probably we'll do some more of that.
He's already doing that. He's putting chips in people already.
He says he has, but people are calling BS on that.
Well, it could be.
Well, speaking of BS and everything, hold on a second. Speaking of BS and all of it along those lines, and coming back to a issue that a lot of us have talked about, and I'd love to hear folks' thoughts around this, but there are swing states that are out there. We know that North Carolina is one, Michigan is one, and there are a number of other ones, and Biden is trying to win some support in the swing state of Michigan. He went to visit a UAW, United Auto Workers Union Hall, but apparently he's getting some pushback because, there is a strong Muslim population there as well. So apparently the number of the folks that are in that part of the community are not too happy with Mr. Biden, and that could potentially hurt him in this swing state and everything, because apparently pro-Palestinian protesters had a very tense standoff with riot police outside Biden's campaign event in Michigan that was held, looks like it was held yesterday or something along those lines. But any thoughts around this swing state, and particularly that demographic that could...
So Biden needs Michigan. In Michigan, there are roughly as many Arab and Muslim voters as Biden's margin of victory in 2020. So if they all flip because they're pissed off about what Israel's doing in Gaza, then it makes it super tough for Biden to win that state.
Yeah, and then the election could flip, Mark.
Yeah, it could definitely flip, and then that's definitely.
But it makes you wonder, why did all this stuff happen right at the time it did? You got, Russia loves to poke its fingers into everything, and China does some poking too. And then there are all the BRICS countries, maybe not Brazil, but a lot of these countries that are aligned against us. They love stirring up stuff. And it's all stirred up now, leading up to the election with this intractable awfulness going on in Israel, Gaza. And you have to think that Putin's pretty happy about the situation in the Mideast.
I mean, I think it would be good for Biden to sit down with the Muslim leaders that a lot are protesting against him. It'd be good for him to sit down with a coalition of them to at least discuss, because they're going to continue to protest because of what's going on in Israel and Gaza right now. And I mean, they have a legitimate argument, but they are going to stay constant until they feel that they are heard, and until they are heard, he's still going to, as he said, that last one that he had at the UAW, I think it was, where they had to have extra security to keep those individuals out. I think he needs to just really get a coalition of them, sit them down, well, not sit them down, but have a sit down with them and talk, have that as the way to move forward. Because again, unless they're going to be heard, they're going to keep on protesting. The thing that I think we didn't touch on, because you brought it up, Mark, but I think we skipped over it, was the Weiselberg thing. Because now he can no longer be used as a witness for anything that Trump wants to do, because he has been seen as perjury based on lying before the courts before. And so Trump would lean on him to protect him from the case that's going on in New York and everywhere else, the other 90 some odd cases, but he can't do that anymore. So now he's just lost another person, a corrupt individual just like himself, going to jail.
Jacoby, you realize why we haven't heard the final figure on judgment against Trump that was supposed to be before February 1st or even February 1st, and it didn't happen. It will happen next week, because exactly of what you just described. This is a new huge red flag against Trump. And if before that, I thought that the final figure would be somewhere $500, maybe $600 million. Now I think it will be closer to $1 billion. Crush him. There is no jail for Trump. There is just complete financial decimation of Trump.
But speaking of that, Sasha, and everything, one of the other issues that we've talked about on this show, and definitely other media outlets have talked about it as well, is the notion of the migrant situation. And apparently there was an incident in New York yesterday where at least 7 were arrested and accused of attacking police officers outside a New York City migrant area and all along those lines, because we know a number of people were shipped from one of the states to New York and New Jersey and other places. And Daniel Penny lawyer blasted the release of the migrants who apparently attacked this New York City Police Department officer without bail, and called it very confounding and everything. So I'm wondering, is this whole notion of kind of this backlash from some of the migrants in the communities that they've been dumped in going to be a winning point for those that are part of the MAGA camp and part of the Trump camp as well? Because, some people will be like, you can't trust those migrants. You send them off to New York. It's like all this great opportunities that they can have. And yes, I'm being slightly sarcastic and everything. And they can't even go get a job. They've got to go beat up on the police and all along those lines. But I just wondering, do you think that this kind of reaction could be a tipping point for some of those that are already concerned about the migrant issue?
Pundits like to say, and they're probably right, that the Republicans are running on border and immigration issues. Right. And if that becomes the loudest voice in the election, then the Republicans win the presidency. If we deal with other stuff. So yeah, Fox is going to hammer immigration all the time. You asked what it was like over in England. Now, Europe is, I don't know, roughly 10% Muslim now after mass immigration over the past couple decades. And what I noticed about, England being, having a ton of Muslims is Muslims are just like everybody else for the most part. I mean, sure, like there are 1.4 billion Muslims in the world. And so with a population that big, there are going to be some psychotic a-holes. But most Muslims on the buses, in the subways, like everybody's just wanting to live their lives. And you got the whole full range of Muslim people. And they might wear, like hair coverings, but some are trying to look hot, some are tired after coming home from they're just the same. And the US, if you're worried about Muslims like my friend Lance is when we do our show, the US has 1% Muslims. And so like even if you're freaked out about that and about immigrants, our issues, our percentage of immigrants and Muslims are so much less than Europe's. And really, Europe is not that much in a terrible way because of immigration. But yeah, the Republicans will make we're at negative population growth without immigrants. We're not having enough babies in America to keep the population growing. And so there's room for immigrants. Yeah, we should clean up immigration, but it's not this issue that will demographically tear America apart.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Rick. The Republicans are going to make that an issue, but don't discount Donald. I mean, even on these judgments that he gets, he'll probably post an appeal, which is about a 10% bond, and he'll just carry it through.
Who's
the
going to
appeal.
get him bond? Come on.
Yeah,
Nobody
so
will.
I mean, you know,
He
you
has
got to
to put
imagine.
cash. He already put cash $5 million. He already put cash, his own money, supposedly. And now he has to come up with close to $100 million just for Agent Carroll case. Wait next week when the judgment of anywhere from 500 million up to probably $1 billion, if not more, and he has to again put cash to appeal. He has no money, please.
Well, you know, I worked with real estate developers for nearly 40 years.
He cannot touch all his real estate developments are already.
Let me tell you about people in real estate. They never have cash, Sasha. Okay,
well,
so he is a typical real estate.
I'm coming from
no cash, a lot of real estate.
He declared
last
year, about a year ago, he himself declared that he has about $400 million cash. Forget about real estate assets, cash. Okay, very good. Now, even considering that probably he still has the same number, it should be much less. To begin with, I don't believe in his own announced number of 400 million cash. I don't believe that. But even consider that, okay, there is 400, and it's still there. He didn't touch that. But he now has to come up with probably twice as much as that. And where is the money?
Well, you know what would be interesting is the stretch that these are politically motivated.
Doesn't matter.
I know,
cash.
It doesn't matter.
Bring the cash.
Okay, he's going to try to get the general public, his Republican sponsors, to pay for it. He's going to say, "This is a political judgment. Has nothing to do with me. I'm an innocent man. Please donate to the Donald Trump campaign to pay my debts."
But hold a second.
$50 million of NCR funds. He already used that. That's why Republicans are sitting on. All they have now is $8 million cash. That's it.
Try to raise more cash.
But hold on a second. Nick and Sasha. Hold on a second. Nick and Sasha.
He's not running his rallies anymore.
But
there is no cash to pay for it. Okay? No more rallies. Trump, where you are? It's election year. Get your rallies on the road. Sorry, I have no money. Nah. Okay.
But Nick and Sasha, one of the other issues that has come up, and I kind of alluded to it with the migrants, and I'd love to hear even Jatov's thoughts around this, because there's also the notion of race and race relations playing a part in the elections as well. And a lot of people talk about the divided society, and there are some people out there, including I'm sure some of the MAGA supporters, that are wondering why we have to have a month that is devoted toward African-American achievements, because today is the second day of Black History Month and all along those lines. So Jatovi, I just wanted your thoughts around that. And for those that are wondering why we have this day, why it is still needed in the year 2024, and how the Republicans will probably try to play this division as part of the conversation as well and everything. So actually, Toby looks like he's bounced off. But
well, we have 4% more Black history this year because it's a leap year, and Black history gets an extra day. And the joke about Black History Month is they gave Black people the shortest month of the year, but this year you got a bonus day. But back to Trump. Trump and family are the biggest deadbeats in the history of America. They've skipped out on about $1.5 billion in legitimate debt and taxes over the past 50 years. And yeah, it's tough Trump has survived off of loans, but he's known for defaulting on loans and renegotiating loans after they've been made. And he used to be able to get more loans via Russian money laundering through Deutsche Bank. But this was before he was president and a candidate, and there was less scrutiny of Trump. And now that all eyes are on Trump and his business dealings, it's probably going to be harder for him to get the loans and the bonds he needs to appeal these judgments.
Yeah, but Rick, and this is for you, Nick, as well. There is another group of society that is sometimes seen as being a pivot group in terms of what goes on in politics and all along those lines. You know, there's a group called PETA or PETA and everything that deals with pets and animals and all along those lines. And I just recently saw that Flacco, and you were just up there in New York, which is a celebrity owl, has escaped from the Central Park School and is apparently flying all over New York until they can catch him and all along those lines. And of course, we do have this whole notion of Groundhog Day. And there are some people that might say that we are abusing the groundhog when we are asking him to find his shadow and everything. So I just wondering, will the animal rights activists come out in droves, and will they have a voice in the election, or are they too small of a group to even make a difference? Because I do know that a lot of times people are concerned. We even have like some leash laws here in Durham and everything around the dogs and all along those lines. But is that part of the group, and those people that are into climate change, is in addition to animal rights, going to be a pivot group as well in this election? So are they going to be paying attention and saying, hey, wait a minute, you know, y'all got
you have two organizations,
all these other groundhogs and everything, and y'all are abusing them.
You have two animal welfare organizations, ASPCA. Those are sane people. And you have PETA, which is kind of half crazy. You know, some of the things PETA says are not crazy, but then they also have crazy ideas. They're against the idea of having pets in general, that there's no way for humans to take care of animals in the way that animals deserve. Which is just ridiculous. You know, we pet owners for the most part, take very good care of their animals. But PETA thinks we shouldn't have pets, and often PETA runs kill shelters because they think it would be better for an animal to be dead than to be adopted by a family. So no, I don't think PETA.
Yeah, I knew PETA was a little bit out of control. I guess they didn't get the memo that we've domesticated animals over 100,000 years. And my dog would disagree, because my dog lives really, really well here in our house. If you said, hey, go out in the wild and fend for yourself, little Tilly would have no shot. You know, so PETA can stick it. By the way, I did run into a PETA style Nazi over here in Raleigh, Durham. So we took our little dog and we put her in we went to go to the museum. So we roll down the windows, we give her water, we let her sit there, and somebody called a police officer in, and they gave me a ticket. I'm going, what's this for? Well, you know, it's too hot. Well, so I went and researched the law. The law actually said it has to go 80, and I had all the date time stamps. The most it got that day was like 75. And the windows were cracked and everything. So I brought all the evidence to court. I went to court 3 times. And you know what happened to the PETA police officer? She never showed up. And then the judge finally just dismissed the case because there wasn't.
That's how you fight tickets. Like you file an appeal, right, and hope the cop doesn't show. I've gotten tickets over the years, but I've never paid a ticket in LA because I challenge it and you go to court.
Yeah, but you waste a lot of time because you're going, and then finally get it off.
Right. So it relies on you having a lot of time to waste sitting.
Yeah. But also we had a good case. I mean, I brought in the date and all the evidence that showed that it never hit 80. But this is kind of the extreme that some of the these people go through. And then I heard about PETA, that they're a little bit wingnuts and no one should donate to them. They're horrible. Horrible organization. Please don't donate to PETA. And no, my little dog would not like being out in the wild. She's
what you do before you go in the wild. I've met your little dog and everything, but along those same lines, there is a number of organizations that are also playing a part in politics. And I'd love to hear y'all thoughts about this. And we got about another 10 minutes before we have to run off to Ukraine, Russia, and China show that Sasha does a great job of with his amazing guests, including the gentleman from Kyiv and everything. But there are union strikes that are going on, including the one that is in Boston, Massachusetts, where the teachers are upset that they're not getting enough pay and want to see some more benefits and a number of other things. So I was just wondering y'all's take on this and whether the union space, because I mentioned UAW there in Michigan and this is in Massachusetts, if this is going to be an important issue, because we just know that in California, where you are, Rick, the writers just had a strike, and now apparently there is a strike here. And I want to say that even here in Durham, North Carolina, there were several schools that were not going and having school because some of the teachers were on strike in support of wanting better pay, and I think also supporting some of the other groups that are in there, like the counselors and people along those lines. But I just wanted y'all's take on these strikes. Like I said, we even had the sanitation strike here in Durham not that long ago as well. And I know up there in Canada, there was the whole notion, I believe that was with the truckers. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sasha.
Strikes are generally effective. That when people get pissed off enough to go out on strike, and it takes a lot in America. In Europe, people go out on strike at the drop of a hat, but here it takes a lot, and they generally work, and then the strikers generally win, and then the corporation turns around and goes, well, yeah, you strikers, we're shutting down that branch of Starbucks for various BS reasons. So the strikers generally win, and then the corporations still figure out a way to screw over the strikers.
Yeah,
I remember one case when strikers didn't win. It was during Ronald Reagan, the air controller strike.
Yes.
Remember that?
Yeah, I do remember.
Yeah, that was actually a big loss for labor. And I don't think people realize how corporations and the people at the top of the corporations suck the blood literally out of the bottom. And frankly, they do not care. You know, I've been very fortunate to have to work with them for 40 years now. And how, you know, when I see the disparity of the incomes, it's just appalling. And there's no mechanism that's going to stop that. So you're going to have, you have a couple different classes of people in the United States. And if you're in the top 10% in the US economically, you're doing okay. Top 5% even better, top 1%, you're hitting home runs. But the bottom 90% are just getting slaughtered, you know, and neither one of the candidates are worth a darn for the bottom 90%. I just don't. But I think that the election is not going to hinge on any issue. It's going to be hinging on personality. They're going to.
But Nick, along the same lines and everything, there is
another. Because he's old, and they're going to attack Trump because he's a crook.
Yeah, but Nick, along those same lines and everything, there is an issue that is in the news. It's in the news, apparently in Michigan. Every time I turn around, there is another one that is taking place. But is the notion of protecting our guns, either keeping the guns if you've got them, and I don't currently have one, but that doesn't mean I won't get one later and everything, or that doesn't mean that it's not a necessity and all along those lines. But is this notion of protecting your guns are going to be an important issue? Because even in Michigan, we're seeing that the school shooter's mom is saying that she was not responsible for the guns. You know, they might have had guns in the house, but she wasn't responsible for them, and all along those lines. And she is facing cross-examination in that manslaughter trial, that being the case of Jennifer Crumbley and everything. But definitely our thoughts around the rights of folks to keep their guns and to maintain their guns, whether they're here or whether they're in Canada, or whether they're in.
They're showing clips of her testimony. She's doing a terrible job of defending herself. She looks, you know, people need media consultants, and she looks bad on the stand, and her testimony is weak, so she's in trouble.
Ooh.
But I want to go back just quickly with a tip for if you get a ticket and you decide or you're thinking about fighting it, look on social media into the life of the cop who gave you the ticket to see whether they're likely to show up in court. The last time I got a ticket, I found the cop's name and I looked him up on social media and his Facebook page. Here he is on vacation in Hawaii. Here he's a professional guitarist. when a big musical act comes to LA and they need background guitarists at like SoFi Stadium, he's one of the guys who's playing in the background. You know, if Springsteen is down a musician, you know, they'll hire this guy. I'm like, this guy has a great life. He's not going to waste a day showing up in court. So I challenged the ticket and I was right.
Yeah, great thing. Just really quickly before we get out, and we only got 5 minutes, then we've got to go off to the Ukraine, Russia, and China show. But Toby, I had asked you earlier, and I'd love to hear your thoughts as to why we need Black History Month, because today is the second day, and you had actually gone off camera and everything. And there are some people out there that'll be like, there is no need for them to have Black History Month. So, as another representative of the minority culture, along with myself and everything, I'd love to hear your thoughts as to why we need a Black History Month in this particular day and time of 2024.
Are we still having first for African Americans in particular areas of society?
Yes.
Same thing. Are we still having first of women in particular areas of society? So we need the history. We need to learn the history. That's the part that's forgotten, that we never really touch on. Yes, we're all one. Why are we? The problem is we come up with so many ways to use culture, to use race as an attack, rather than looking at it as a celebration, rather than saying, hey, I know Sasha has a heritage around. I would love to learn more about that, rather than Sasha, you're that, so you should be evil. We have to change our mindset. Black History Month is still needed because there's a lot of history that is forgotten, erased, and taken away. Heck, they're still fighting. They're still trying to take diversity and equity and inclusion away. They're fighting against diversity. The same reason Black History Month was put together, because we're ignoring our history. We're ignoring the diversity. It's necessary. Same thing with HBCUs. At one point, Black people weren't allowed to go to school. Had to create their own. So these things are still necessary because our history is still around us. No matter what Nikki Haley wants to say, even though she keeps, woman, we still know the problems that are in our society. Yeah, we've gotten better, but they're not gone. Black people still receive loan. Minorities are still 70 cents on the dollar compared to in terms of loans, 70% less, and all this stuff. This is all part of the history that we should learn, be educated on, because we're not educated on it throughout the full year because we tend to forget about it and try and do the both sides, everybody. Well, are we going to say that now sickle cell is racist? Or, hey, sickle cell affects Black people, so we should look at that. But, sickle cell doesn't like white people. What? It doesn't make any sense. We got to learn the history, the heritage, to understand cultures, to understand of races, to understand of what makes everybody better. Not, hey, let me use it as an attack.
Yep. Along those same lines and everything, Rick, you had a quick question, and we only got about a minute to go.
All right.
The thing I was going to add to it really quickly.
16 years ago, we elected president, a guy who had a white parent and a Black parent. And things seemed pretty good I'm not Black, so I can't say how things seemed, but, to people who weren't paying attention, things seemed, but then the guy who attacked him, Donald Trump, who attacked Obama, saying he wasn't a true American, that he was a Kenyan, we had a national freak out. Since 2016, we've been having a freak out because we got a light-skinned Black man get to be president, and now we're in this racist mess, and we elected, Trump was first legally found to be racist via an FBI investigation for discriminatory renting in 1972. More than 50 years ago, we elected this guy president, and this guy ran for president just because Seth Meyers and Obama made fun of him. We still have a problem because one of America's most notorious racists is the leading Republican candidate for president.
And not to mention, he's retweeting white supremacists. He's quoting Hitler. His Stephen Miller is a well-known bigot himself. He loves himself some Tucker Carlson, who thrives off bigotry and racism. It's like we forget these things. The Bundys, the remember the whole Bundy clan, and they did the interview. Well, slaves were enjoying themselves. No, it wasn't a party. They were slaves. So it's wild that we forget our history. Oh, Mark went to the back and Nick is in the back.
Yeah.
No,
So
I came up because we have to end the show, but because we have Ukraine coming up. But do want to thank everybody for the comments. And yes, we're very competitive with The View, but they have more viewers at The View than they have on World Edition. Other than that,
we have more fun and we have fewer commercials.
we definitely have fewer commercials. So we'll see you next Monday on World Edition. Bye-bye.